All right, thank you, Henry, for the introduction. We're going to have this be an interactive session at the end where we're going to have questions and answering time. I'm more than happy to hear those questions. All right, so first, what is general reinsurance? So we are a Berkshire Hathaway company, and we deliver reinsurance solutions for both property and casualty and life and health insurance industries. In other words, we provide insurance for insurance companies. We're one of the largest reinsurance companies in the world with almost $11.5 billion in net written premium. We have made significant contributions to the reinsurance industry as a whole. We were the first independent reinsurance company born in 1846 and the first company to offer casualty property facultative reinsurance in the 1950s. We were the first company to write reinsurance on an access basis. Gen Re is a global organization. We are positioned in 22 countries with 42 offices and over 2,000 associates. I am based out of the United States office in Stamford, Connecticut, but work remote from Florida. Now, general reinsurance includes several companies, as you see here, one of which you may be familiar with Faraday, which serves the London market. Now that I've shared a bit about a company that I work for, let's talk about what led me to the current position I am, what I'm accountable for, and what I've done with accountability. Now, through my journey, I have acquired many personas. We will discuss each of these personas and how these personas and characteristics from the personas are being used to build an effective data team. So the first persona that was formed was an actuary. I graduated with a statistics degree from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and I started my career as an actuary, a person who used mathematical and statistical techniques to assess and manage risk. So what do I do as an actuary? I perform actuarial analysis for rate finance, legislative analysis, reserving, and to do this, I use actuarial systems. These systems have the data already in it and perform these actuarial calculations. Now, taking a step back and reflecting from a team structure perspective, having this type of business knowledge from the insurance industry is key to being effective as a team as a whole. Now, at this point, I began to mature in this area as an actuary. And I wanted to better understand what the underlying data generating process was, the data underlying these actuarial systems. So that led to my second persona, which was being a data scientist. So I actually went back to college while I was working full-time and earned a master's degree in computer science from the Florida Atlantic University. I used this degree to broaden my skill set as a data scientist to analyze and to interpret these complex data, which went in these underlying systems, and to extract valuable insight and use for decision making. And so what I do as a skill set as a data scientist, I develop actuarial models for reserving and pricing. I built end-to-end applications that extracted this underlying data, transformed it, provided that model we built into there, and then provided results to the end user. So now that I built the system end-to-end, I'm now able to explain this black box to the actuaries, to the practice leaders effectively. In other words, I became that liaison between the data scientists and the leaders of the company. And it was also actually very positive, and we actually had a big need to grow. Now, again, reflecting back to this team structure perspective, when building a team, having that business knowledge and that technical knowledge merged together to be able to enable the team to create and build new products is key to any type of team that wants to strive forward to new technology. Now, admittedly, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. So I remember this quote: "Experience is simply the name that we give our mistakes," by Olive Whitley. And I lived by this through my journey already. So like many of you, I started on the business side, and I was disruptor of the status quo, especially from a legacy companies that have been around for 50 to 100 years. I worked in these silos and created these new technologies using new tech that came in, for example, RStudio at the time. I created significant hype within the organization of let's re-platform the systems, let's replace these Excel files, and create something that's automated, that's quick and easy. I established and created these silo areas or departments that are able to do this on a more efficient basis and expanded the team. Well, the challenges, this led to many challenges that began to surface. How are we going to scale in terms of deploying these products? Who's going to do the development support, meaning adding new features, adding new capabilities? Who's going to do the production support, meaning after we build it, who's going to make sure it stays up and running? So the overall support was in question. Now, and then where's the enterprise alignment? I was doing this all from an actuarial organization, but what about everyone else knowing what we're doing? IT or underwriting and such. Then it gets into bigger questions of, well, what about who's going to, I get questions from the business leaders, has IT looked at this at all? Do they even know that we're doing this? Have they even been part of this review process or know where we're deploying, and are they going to even help us support it? And once in a while you get the question of, well, can Excel do the exact same thing? So this came the third persona, information technology. To answer these questions and to continue this journey, I transitioned into information technology. So this is where we look at things from an enterprise perspective. What is the technology stack? How we deal with budgeting? IT doesn't make a profit, but what we do is we bring to the business these solutions which they fund. How we do prioritization. From a global perspective, as Gen Re, we need to prioritize how our projects are going to be landing across all the business segments we're stretched globally. How are we going to support from a development and production aspect? How are we going to ensure that secure, that all of our data or all of our assets are secure within our account? And then what if something goes wrong? Say one of our services goes down, how do we bring it back effectively? Now, this was an eye-warming experience for me. So while through my career at this point, from a high level, I knew that these things were going on behind the scenes. But being part of it and driving it brought me a whole new perspective. So in other words, I'm an actuary and data scientist who moved into an IT organization who now leads a data organization within it. So what does this actually mean? When working with the business, you speak the business language. And this other way is true as well. From an IT, I need to translate that to business terms so they understand what we're talking about, and then when they have their feedback, we retranslate that back to IT knowledge. Now, for example, I'm doing something a little simple. If the business requirement is that we need something to stay up and running for both internal and external users, well, we might translate it to high availability and look at solutions such as load balancers and/or serverless solutions. How do we support it? Well, we might have to look at L1 support, something that's going to always be there 24 hours, 7 days a week. And we need to deliver these answers into business terms to the business. And reflecting back from one of my past organizations I've worked for, this was a big, significant skill gap within IT. And that's mainly because we have very strong technical knowledge and this domain-specific business knowledge that wasn't merged together. And doing that was very effective now. Now, from a leadership perspective, there are two pieces that are critical. One, the strategy and alignment to that strategy. So when take two. Can I go back one? There you go. All right, so when I started, we were 1 year into this cloud journey. So meaning we did a lift and shift from our current on-prem and moved it to the cloud. And I was accountable for two main things. One, developing a modern enterprise data architecture utilizing cloud services. And two, develop the strategy to achieve that. So So this is where that definition of data as a service comes from. It's a data management strategy that utilizes cloud services for delivering data usage, integration, processing, and analytic solutions. Now, while I shared the same goal, the same definition as this, admittedly, I recently just learned this actual phrase because I thought things a little differently. So I come from a very engineering type of background. From growing up, I will dissect whatever I have. It could be a toy, it could be, as I grew up, an engine, and whatnot. I like to understand how things worked and why they work this way and why were they built this way. And because of that, I learned how modularization is key to the success of anything that's being developed. And so if you think back to technology, or for data stack, is that we want to modularize each of the pieces of a data workflow process. And then it made us start thinking about how do we get in the data, one piece, the second piece, storing that data, then transforming data, and then finally using that data. And so from a very high level, this is the way I would describe this to an executive of an enterprise data architecture, which is that framework. We have where to source the data from. It could be from websites, it could be from web pages, it could be from Word documents, Excel files, whatnot, applications. Then we need to have a process that will acquire data, extract it out for whatever that is. So we do a pull from that. While we're pulling it, we need to store it somewhere. So next piece, where are we storing that? Then we need to manage that data or enrich that data within that storage. And then finally, make it accessible for usage. Then this needs to all sit on top of some systematic development and operations process. And that's sit on top of the governance to ensure that this is being done appropriately and meets all of our requirements from an industry level. Now, so this is the data architecture. Now, some of the questions I get over the time was, well, what is the return on investment of the architecture? Well, the architecture is a framework, or is a capability that opens up a new capabilities such as self-service. So this is key to one of my platforms, which was in the use side. We want to enable business people to be able to get the data whenever they need it. So that's self-service perspective. Meaning that if they wanted to be able to do reporting on that data, or it's data science or analytics, or simply want to grab it and put in an Excel sheet, it should be available to them. Next is, what about new technology coming in, such as AI? We have the recent innovations of generative AI in the last, in this recent year, and this setup is designed for that specifically because that sits in the use side. It's able to connect to our storage and our management capabilities and be able to make use of that data for AI, generative AI. Now, the next question I sometimes get is like, how do I know I'm building the right thing? I go back to basic principles of engineering, modularization. And in this piece, this is fully modularized because if I were to, if new tech came in saying that there's a whole new way of storing data that's more effective, I can take out that storage piece, put in the new one, reconnect between the acquire and the manage, and things should still work. Of course, it's a little more complex than that, but ideally that's how it's set up. Now, the next piece is, well, the alignment. And this is an image from what they call the most awkward and powerful handshake, because it is alignment across many different levels of the company. You're talking about senior executives, so the chairmen, the C-suite, all the way to the business leaders, so those that report to them. And then finally, all the technical folks, the analysts, the engineers, the architects. We all need to get alignment and see this vision and see it forward. And again, the same considerations need to happen to get this alignment. What is the enterprise technology stack? We can't be having all these different solutions that solve kind of the same problem. We need to have an enterprise solution that will do that. Budgeting, again, IT, we don't make a profit, so we don't have a technical real budget. We bring in from the business side on how we're going to enable them to do more with new technology. Project prioritization, and the other piece is staffing. We want to expand our internal staff to be able to have this knowledge in-house, but also from an external basis too, vendors. So how does the vendor model support work? Well, enterprise data services, which sits on top, we separate support into two pieces, development and production. In terms of development, we want to be able to build anew, right? So this is the change state. production. Once it's been changed, we want to make sure it stays up and running and has that as a support to ensure that if someone in the middle of the night has a question or something's wrong, they have someone there to fix it. So this is where it brings in a multi-vendor organization, because we want to be able to strive to have more capabilities from and get the best from each of the different vendors. And one of our strategic development support vendors is Ascent. And so what we have been working with them lately was, well, one, they're part of our baseline support, meaning that they're part of our ability to keep certain consultants in our line in recurring basis for multi-years. So then we can grow that internal knowledge with strong development support to be part of these different projects that we'll be spinning off. The second piece is, well, those large projects. From an international basis, we have what they call a pricing platform, which is currently built in a legacy data stack, ACL. And so what we worked with Ascent is to rebuild that platform from the bottom up, rethinking how that's designed and how that integrates with the overall data architecture. And so that's a large multi-year project with end users stretching globally. All right, so kind of reflecting back from the time I started, which was about 2 years ago, the first thing to do was, and following the strategy I was mentioning a little earlier, was assembling this data team. And so as you see, we have all the different data components that make up a team. We have the data science, the platforms, the applications, the governance, and the engineering and reporting. So we bring all these data practitioners together into one organization, because before that, they were spread across IT. We did provide these dedicated resources to talk about architecture, tooling, technologies, and a new concept that I brought in was as champions. Individuals who knew this technology stack and are ready to promote it as much as they can throughout the business. So what did we do with this? So, the whole objective was delivering on this data as a service. We changed that business IT culture, which was key. We brought in a concept of champions, so people from the IT organization now sit with the business users to be able to understand what do we mean by using Posit or RStudio for our code. What do we mean by using a data lake, the Power BI? People who knew this technology since it started. The second piece is we need to increase the data budget. How are we going to be building all of these new tools or enable these capabilities without building that on that budget? So and then also expanding on the global team, meaning that we are able to add more capabilities within the data organization to be able to fulfill these needs. Brought in these concept of enterprise global data platforms. Like I mentioned earlier, the idea of having multiple solutions for the same problem doesn't really work very well, especially on a global enterprise basis. So brought in these enterprise global data platforms for solving data reporting, for data analytics, and as well as data engineering. Now, from the time now with all this new technology, new capabilities, our only challenge now is keeping up with the rate of new services and new versions that are being released from these companies. And being in that state has been great in terms of we are looking at where in the ecosystem do we have new generative AI now. And this is our only bottleneck nowadays because we have this strong architecture put in place. Now I want to open this up for questions. And I think someone has a mic.
As a data leader, are you finding an increasing challenge of your data teams understanding the pressures of the CISO and the security teams because the demand on data teams is so high?
Very good question. So the question is, as a paraphrase, is how does the CISO group, the security group, and the data side work together? And where those challenges? So this is where modernizing the architecture is going to be key, right? So I'm going to throw a service out there, Microsoft. If we put everything in the PaaS or a SaaS service, the security and the sharing the regularity of that ability is sitting on the Microsoft side. So meaning that, or Azure side. So meaning that when there's patching or whatnot, I don't have to worry about patching anymore. Microsoft is responsible for that. If there's going to be a security vulnerability that just came out and where we see in the news, whatnot, Microsoft is responsible for fixing that. And this is true from Amazon and Google as well. And so this is where moving to these services rather than building these on-prem or having VMs is going to benefit you in the long run. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Any other questions?
What do you think the biggest challenges will be for data leaders in the next 10 years with new tools such as AI coming out?
So the biggest challenge for these data analytics with AI is the ability to communicate and the knowledge, right? So meaning we need to put people, the champions, in place to be able to educate the end users, to educate the difference between understanding when we have a generative AI type of text generator versus trying to understand what the actual underlying meaning of a text classification is. So there's a very significant difference between how you build your tooling. Meaning one, if you have, a good example is, I got recently was, well, what about a question answering service? So one person was saying, oh, you do a generative AI, be able to generate text, you ask them a question, you'll be able to do it, attach it to some knowledge base. But then what if that's going to be more of a legal type of setup, meaning that you want to get legally approved answers? Well, now you set up a little different, right? Because you can't just have it generate answers on the fly because they have to meet the legal requirements. So now you're going to look at trying some type of retrieval model, trying to find what is the related from the question to the answer and pull that answer out of some type of knowledge base and respond that back. So very different thinking, a very different way we wanted to come up with that type of solution. And again, this speaks back to why we have champions, so that they can be that first person to be able to talk to and ask these questions and be able to distill that knowledge.
Just a quick one. You mentioned having a strategy earlier in the presentation. I'm interested in how do you report success against that strategy up to the board? Because I'm conscious you'll be translating quite a lot of complicated technical things. So how do you make the data as a service strategy relevant to the board in terms of success?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so how do we show the value of a strategic vision? And so the pieces is one. In the beginning, I was able to be like, okay, we brought these services on, and here's the strategy, and yes, each of those services on, yay, great. But what about the actual value from that? And what we work with is the actual business units itself. Let's show you using these tools. I wanted us to be able to show the board that you use the analytics tool and what you get to bring from that. Use those Power BI tools, use those engineering tools to actually bring results that the board is actually end up using. So one of the good examples is that IPT project that I was mentioning a little earlier, that international pricing tool that we're working on. And so in that project, it actually creates pricings. And those end results of those pricings get shown up to the board as an aggregate whole. So it's the output of that work and that architecture that is being shown. All right, I guess I got called up for no more questions. Thank you, everyone.